You're listening to Whoa! Potluck.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Books and Boba, a book club and podcast featuring books by Asian and Asian American authors. My name is Marvin Yue.
And I'm Rira Yu.
And we are here to discuss our October book club pick, Dear America by Jose Antonio Vargas. And to help us discuss this book, it's our first ever crossover edition of Books and Boba. I'm super excited to welcome Elaine Dolalis.
That's right.
One of the hosts of This Filipino American Life to Books and Boba to help us discuss this book. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, it's funny because we talked about this crossover over Twitter about a month or two ago while we were in the same meeting for a comedy festival planning
really?
across from each other. Yeah. But yeah, because October is also Filipino American History Month, so we decided to, pick a theme appropriate book for our book club, and one that you were also discussing on your show as well. And you actually have the interview with the author himself.
Yes, we have a bonus episode with Jose Antonio Vargas, where we talked about his journey as a journalist, and we talk about the book. We don't go into too many details, but it was a really lively conversation, and you can get that at thisfilipinoamericanlife.com.
Yeah, for our listeners, can you talk a little bit more about what your podcast is about?
Yeah, so This Filipino American Life is a podcast that explores the nuanced experiences of Filipinos in the United States. That's
awesome.
Literally our tag.
And you can find it wherever podcasts are found. You know the drill. Apple, Google, Spotify, Stitcher,
all of those things.
Yeah. So without further ado, let's get into it.
All right. We're going to start with the jacket description, as always. Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Jose Antonio Vargas, called the most famous undocumented immigrant in America, tackles one of the defining issues of our time in this explosive and deeply personal call to arms. And this is the beginning of the prologue. I'm going to quote it. This is not a book about the politics of immigration. This book, at its core, is not about immigration at all. This book is about homelessness, not in a traditional sense, but in this unsettled, unmoored psychological state that undocumented immigrants like myself find ourselves in. This book is about lying and being forced to lie to get by, about passing as an American and as a contributing citizen, about families, keeping them together, and having to make new ones when you can't. This book is about constantly hiding from the government and, in the process, hiding from ourselves. This book is about what it means to not have a home.
Yeah.
That is one way to start a book. It's the first page of that book, by the way.
So, as with any nonfiction book, I guess we should start with just our overall impressions of the story, the narrative.
I guess our expectations going into the book, and maybe what we came out with, what we learned, I guess, overall.
Yeah. I guess how familiar were you with Jose before reading the book?
I remember back in 2014, I think he did coverage on a bunch of undocumented immigrants, including himself, and I remember reading that. I don't remember the specific details, but I had just gotten out of college at that point. So, I knew him from that. I didn't know he was a filmmaker either. So that was pretty interesting to
how about you, Elaine?
learn about him.
He came to light because of the Time cover story. I had always just been following his, just as a journalist, because his byline and whatnot. And so, but the cover story is really what got him out there in the forefront. And then since then, it's just been following his career. And when we started the podcast, I think he was one of those bucket list guests. So when we were able to get him, that was pretty awesome.
Nice. Yeah, I think I started noticing, or he came into my orbit about when I started getting involved with collaboration back in the mid 2014, 2015, especially the run up to the presidential election, where immigration and things like that were big topics, and he was speaking at a lot of events. And he actually spoke at an event that I helped produce. It was a Get Out the Vote type of variety show called I Am Asian American that I did with along with Jeff Yang, where he was one of our speakers.
You want to know something funny? So I read this book during Politicon because I was there for work. We were selling books, and oh my god, it was traumatizing. There were like a sea of MAGA hats, and,
of course, gross.
And like during my breaks, I would read this book in plain sight. It's a bright yellow book.
Yeah,
so like I would see like judging eyes as I'm like reading it in front of like all these Trump supporters, and like we had like authors signing like a couple of feet away from us. So there was like Ann Coulter and like Ben Shapiro, and I was just like, oh my god, this is the worst. And
I mean, it's the worst and it's the best too, right?
Yeah.
Like, he talks about in our episode, he talked about how like he chose the color yellow because there's like definite like references to the fact that like yellow in the Philippines with the Corea Kino, like the Laban movement, and also yellow because he's Asian. Like it ties it all together, and I love that it is loud that everybody can see it.
like there was a stage right by our booth, and most of it was like Democratic talk, but of course there were hecklers because it was mostly Trump supporters there. And at some point, they had a Republican talk, and it was just I had to listen for 30 minutes about like these angry white men just being like, undocumented immigrants are like a drain on the economy. Like we need to like make sure that they stay behind the border. And I was just like, oh my god,
Well, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, something that Jose talks about a lot is the reality versus the perception of the illegal immigrant, right? And something he brought up really early on was like, there weren't such things as illegal immigrants until maybe like this past century. It wasn't until the naturalization reforms that illegal immigrant became a thing. Like people just used to be undocumented migrant workers, and the borders used to just be open.
Well, I think like racism and institutional racism is what brought upon the like use of the term illegal immigrant, because it was a way to like change the narrative.
Yeah,
because I feel like that rise in that phrase happened in like the 90s, especially in California with like Prop 187 and just racist policies that were put in place. And so I feel like the Republican like playbook is now just to play upon a lot of those 90s fears, but then just amplified with like Hollywood shine because of like Steve Bannon's like history in the industry. It's really disgusting.
Yeah, and I mean they play upon the tropes that like illegal immigrants are job stealers, they're criminals, they're the people, they're like the undesirables from other countries that come and take your jobs, where in reality a lot of them are people that if you see them off the street you wouldn't suspect them to be here illegally. Yeah,
like the stereotype is like a Latino immigrant, as opposed to like the fact that Latino immigrants are actually low. They've been decreasing over the years, but it doesn't like fulfill the like right wing narrative. But Asian American undocumented numbers are increasing, and including like Black African undocumented residents is on the rise. And like that story it doesn't fit in the proper narrative. It doesn't fit in the proper box. And I do think that Dear America highlights the stories that don't fit the box.
Right. I want to talk about your personal understanding of undocumented immigrants before reading the book. Like, did you learn a lot through the book, or was it stuff you already knew?
Well, my experience before reading the book is that Jose talks about mixed families, and I come from a mixed family. So I've had family members who were undocumented, and then other family members who are citizens. So that was the term mixed family. I hadn't heard that applied to like that mixed status. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I learned from there. And then the story that he shares where he was 16 and he goes to the DMV and he brings his green card, or what he thinks is his green card, to the DMV to get a driver's license. That wasn't my story, but when I was in college, my best friend, we went to the Costa Mesa DMV. It was just as the law had passed where if you were undocumented, you couldn't get a driver's license anymore. But there were still DMVs that were like on the fence and were still issuing out driver's license. So I drove my best friend to the Costa Mesa DMV and we went to see if he can get a driver's license. And it was the story that Jose tells about how like the DMV worker tells him like, I'm sorry, I can't do this. This is fake. Please don't come back here. And then like sets him on his way as a 16-year-old. I literally witnessed the same thing with my best friend where the person behind the counter at the DMV said, I'm sorry, there is nothing I can do. I cannot issue you a driver's license or a California ID. And she like just put us along our merry way. And, it's just interesting that like as like much of a dumpster fire the world is, there is always going to be like kind people who are willing to help and treat you like a human being. And that's what is in Dear America so frequently, is that he highlights how all these people help him. And then in my experience, I witnessed it, and like that DMV worker in Orange County could have been like, you know, F you, like I'm going to call ICE or INS or whatever it was called at the time to like take my friend away. But she didn't. She was just like, you need to leave. And I just remember like the distraughtness that he writes about in the book. I remember feeling the same way. And like my best friend is gay, like Jose Antonio Vargas is. And I remember telling him, okay, do you want to get married? Like the moment moment we left the DMV. And he was like, no, it's not going to happen. Like, I love you, but no. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, because I was with my boyfriend at the time, and he was like, he won't mind. He wouldn't even care. And my best friend was like, no, we're not doing this. We'll figure something else out.
I come from an immigrant family. I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to the States when I was 3. And we immigrated because my dad's company asked him to set up a branch here in America, multiple branches. And I didn't become a citizen until I was like 20. But my family was always like I wouldn't say conservative, but they had this idea of like, oh, like we came here legally. All of the immigrants who came here without papers, like they're giving us a bad look. And it's their fault that like a lot of people see us as suspicious and us as like taking away jobs, which is not the case. And like they would say these things, and like I thought that all of my friends, all of the people that I went to church with, like they were all like, you know, they all legally came here because it's a Korean church, and like almost everyone is an immigrant or like second generation. But then once I got into high school, I started noticing things like, oh, like she doesn't drive like at all. Like she should be able to get her driver's license, or how like parents are always like, so they're pressuring their kids to reach this academic excellence, but like the parents are like, oh, you can't apply for the Ivy League schools. You have to stay in state. You have to try saving money by going to a community college.
I mean,
and like I would see these subtle things.
Did they know that because there was a law that passed that even if you were undocumented, if you can prove you went to high school in California, you would get in-state tuition? Did they know that?
This was in Georgia.
Oh, this was in Georgia.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Never mind.
Yeah. So that was really interesting because a lot of those people, a lot of the younger teens, they didn't know that they were undocumented until they were like 17, 18.
Like Jose was in the book.
Yeah, and they're like planning to go to college, and it's just like, I'm sorry, like we can't send you to like these really expensive private colleges, even though you totally deserve to go, but you can't.
Yeah.
So like I think reading this book has really opened my eyes on like how they would get a driver's license, what they have to do to like keep their head down, and just like the constant anxiety of like just making sure no one knows. And
I feel like figuring that out like at that stage in life is a pretty common, story. And there's nothing they could have done to avoid it, right? The thing that like people don't realize is like undocumented immigrants still pay into the system. Like they pay Social Security for work, they pay taxes, and like they pay everything that you pay without
they don't get any
of the benefits. Yeah. Something that really hit me when reading about Jose finding out about his situation is, in confronting his grandparents, there's this like disconnect between what our parents and grandparents' generation think about the American dream versus what the reality is, and they're always surprised it doesn't work out, right?
Yeah,
because there's this great sales pitch that America does to like wherever it goes, that we're the land of freedom. We're the land of freedom. It's where anyone can come and make a life for themselves.
Yeah, I feel like they blindly bought into the American dream. Yeah. And then it's kind of like, I feel like it's a subject to like baby boomers or something, because it's like they all buy into this I can pick myself up by my bootstraps mentality. And then it's like they fail, like they're old. Like my parents are old and they are retired and they've got a nice nest egg that they were able to work towards because they worked for 30 years in an America that still had a prosperous economy. But like they fail to realize like the America we have is like the America that happened in the late 60s, early 70s where things were going haywire.
Yeah. And like America exports culture, right? And there's a line that Jose says, it's a common line I've heard a lot of places, especially when you talk about anti-colonialism, which is like, we are here because you were there. Right. The only reason we're a nation of immigrants is because you went out and like spread throughout the world and like gave the sales pitch that America was a certain way.
Also affected our economies in our home countries and leading us to seek better opportunities in America.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here because, like, thinking about it, like, I'm also an immigrant, even though I was born in Canada and I grew up in America, but I'm like an immigrant because I came from Canada, right? I'm not from here. I mean, even my family, we were able to come to America because my aunt came here for school in the 60s and was able to get a green card because it was back when they were handing out permanent residencies to highly skilled immigrants, right? They needed scientists.
During
they needed
the 60s brain drain.
They needed doctors, nurses, scientists, skilled people. I think my aunt was a nutritionist. I guess they needed nutritionists.
Yeah.
And she was able to apply for everyone in my family. So we were able to, like, if the option came about, or if the opportunity arose, move to America, have permanent residency.
But even then, it's about privilege, right? Like with my family, we were able to immigrate here because my dad happened to graduate from like a really good school. It was able to work for a really good company. And so like the whole like, oh, we earned our citizenship. It's just like we didn't earn anything. Like it was handed to us on a silver platter because of our family and because of our station. There were people who immigrated here with nothing and what do they have to do to earn their citizenship? Like,
right.
Yeah. My family's history is I have two relatives, my aunt and my uncle, who came over in the 60s brain drain. So my one uncle is an engineer and was recruited by like Boeing, and he was in Seattle. And then my aunt is a nurse and she was recruited because obviously she's a nurse. And she was placed in a hospital in Nashville in Tennessee. And so that's where they first started. But my uncle got laid off and he moved to California because there was aerospace in California. And then my aunt said that it was too cold in Nashville because it snowed and she had to like drive in snow and she really did not like it. So she moved to California because, it's sunny there. And those choices are the only reason why my family is in Los Angeles, specifically the San Fernando Valley, because that's where they settled. But had my aunt made the choice to like, instead of going to west, like to LA, had she gone to New Jersey, I would have like grown up in New Jersey because
Or Florida. You dodged a bullet there.
No, I doubt it because no one would go to Florida. No one in my family is in the Navy, so that's the other thing. Like, I'm not like I don't have that Filipino American narrative in my life. My husband does. Like, his dad was in the Navy, and it's the only reason why they're in Oxnard. But they wouldn't have chose Florida. Like, it would have been like, screw that. So that's why they went to California.
I like how so not the novel, sorry. The book is divided into 3 parts: lying, passing, hiding, and I thought it was really interesting that when Jose lands in America, like his grandparents are like trying to Americanize him by like giving him American food and sugar ice cream, and it's like this is what it means to be American to them. It means eating, wearing American products, and just assimilating.
Yeah.
And that is very different from what we consider to be American, I think, as like
I also
1.5 and second generation.
I also think there was a certain time when, especially where it depends on where you were, where like immigrating to the States meant assimilation. Whereas like I grew up in Enclave, I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley. So growing up, I didn't have the pressure to assimilate to American quote unquote culture. It was like, I was just like, I can just speak Chinese and be okay here, you know? But I think there's definitely an Asian American narrative. And this, especially if you end up living in areas where Asians were the minority, where you not only have external pressure to assimilate and fit in, but you also have parental pressure to like, in order for you to fully take advantage of your Americanness, you need to be as American as possible.
Yeah.
And I think there's also, correct me if I'm wrong, and Jose does go into this too, the effects of Western colonialism on Filipino culture meant that like the Western culture is valued above like ethnic,
I mean,
right?
and that's like historically what has happened, just because the experience of immigrants in this country for like hundreds of years has not been necessarily the most positive. And like in Jose's situation, I mean, I have no idea if his grandparents knew like the positively no Filipinos allowed, like Stockton, like signage and like the issues that have happened in California. But you don't need to know that in order to survive, you need to pass or you need to hide. And so I think that's a common story for so many immigrants in this country. And specifically for Jose, like he came in, I think his situation is different from mine in that his family wanted him to assimilate because they knew he was not supposed to be here. So by assimilating means you blend in and then no one will question why you're here. As opposed to like my experience I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, and I grew up in a predominantly Filipino church. And so I've always been like in the majority, whether or not it be with like other people of color or whatnot. And so I didn't, my reference point of like questioning my identity, I didn't really get that until like I had to like leave the valley. Like you were able to like live because you can just speak Chinese. And like for me, like the shorthand was like, I knew I was the norm because I was the norm, right? Like my whole school was either Filipino, Mexican, or El Salvadorian. So like if you were white, you were the one that we were like, why are you here? Like, and if you were black, I don't know how you got there because also, why are you there? That was just like the nature of my environment. And so it's just fascinating because Jose's family was telling him to assimilate, right? But then, like, our families, they didn't have to question that to us because I think they thought, like, if we'll put you in this school with a bunch of other Filipinos, like, you'll just learn from each other. But then we still had the, like, dynamic of, like, still trying to be, like, American teens.
Yeah. I mean, like, with Jose, like, the library is, like, his haven, and it really does help him, like, shape his American identity. He like gorges on all of these American pop cultures, and
well, especially like he was drawn to African American authors like
Toni Morrison
and
James Baldwin.
Yeah. And he found that those stories like resonated more, like the stories from the margins, much more than like the contemporary like white authors like Faulkner and.
I mean, he's not
Hemingway.
wrong. A lot of that stuff is so boring. It's like,
Yeah, it's really boring.
that's like so dry. I just think of it now like the summer reading list I was given in high school, and to like look at what that is. Like, why did I have to read this? It was so awful. But I realized like for so long, the people in power were like these old white people who were like, yes, you have to read Tess of D'Ubervilles. Like, yes, you have to read, I don't know, something terrible. Like Lord of the Flies. It's not terrible, but you know, I get it. But like, there are other books out there where children are being terrible to each other. Like, I'm sure they would have been won by like a person of color who's an author.
I mean, thankfully, right now, in the past like 3-5 years, like children's literature has gotten really diverse.
Yeah.
And not just diverse as in like people of color, but also in sexuality and religion.
I'm so jealous when I see like what kids get to
I
read.
know, right?
Or young adults. Like, I will just read them.
There's a whole genre of kids being terrible to each other. It's called dystopian YA fiction.
Yeah.
I know, right? Like, I feel I'm so jealous because, like, as an adult, like, I still will read YA, even though, and I used to get clowned for it, but I was like, screw you. I want to
Read what you want.
I'm going to read what I want. No shame. Like, I read, in grad school, I had a vampire phase. Well, because, like, it was really big at the time, like the True Blood series, like Charlene Harris.
Right.
So I read all of that, and then I read Twilight simultaneously. And I was like, oh my God, they're stealing from each other. And then that led me to finding, I think her name is Melissa de los Santos or something like that. Like, she writes another vampire series, and she's this Filipino-American.
Is it
De La Cruz.
De La Cruz?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, we actually read her book, Something in Between, like in our first
Which is
year.
about an undocumented.
Yeah,
right?
it's about a Filipina
So
American.
I never even read that. I just devoured the vampire storyline.
She has a series of Alexander Hamilton novels now. Why?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that. I tried to get into that when I was into Hamilton, but I think I over Hamiltoned out.
It's interesting how Jose like turns to journalism because his grandparents are like, keep your head down, like
Yeah.
you can't be noticeable, like
Yeah.
otherwise you'll get caught, and it's kind of like a form of rebellion in a way.
Well, because his grandparents subscribe to the quote unquote plan, right? Which is keep your head down,
Yeah.
work odd jobs, get married, then you can do whatever you want. Because then you get your green card and your citizenship, and then you're fine. Which is like,
It's such a shitty plan. Like, I was so frustrated with his Lolo, like his grandpa, because it was like, all you have to do is get married, all you have to do this. And I was like, you fucked his life up so much by bringing him here. Like, that's,
He can't even
He
leave
can't
either. Yeah.
leave. And I hate that there are so many people like that. Like, my best friend is in the same boat, and like his whole family went to the Philippines to celebrate his Lola's like 90th birthday at one point, and he couldn't go. And I was so mad that he couldn't go. And there's so many like family things where they're like, oh, we're all gonna go here, and it's like, no, but he has to stay. And I'm like, you did this, like, and by you I'm pointing at his like parents and his like like, you did this.
And like the really sad thing is that his grandparents could have adopted him, but they didn't know about that. So
Yeah.
it's like you missed a chance for like Jose to become an American citizen.
because there's this myopia, like there is a step-by-step process to become American if you're like this. And it also shows how like arbitrary just like citizenship is, because like, yeah, if you come when you're already a kid, you're in this limbo status, but if you get born here accidentally, you get all the rights.
Yeah. It's just really frustrating when like other Asian Americans, like, they try to think like they do the narrative of like, I did it right, like I came here and I did this and I did that and you did it wrong, so you deserve to go back. And it's kind of like, all these people who are saying like you did it wrong, like they were children when they came here.
Yeah.
Like, you cannot put blame on a child. They don't have any type of agency. They don't have any decision making process. Like, he talks about how like a quote unquote uncle like takes him on a plane and like he gets here. And I literally was like, oh, that is, he straight up was like with a coyote. Like, that's what like immigrants like from like from like south of the border on there, they use a coyote, and like that dude was straight up coyote from the Philippines.
Yeah, like when I was reading part two is passing, like he's talking about like how he has to compartmentalize. So it's like, these are the people who know about my undocumented status. These are the people who know about like my queerness. And then these are the people who don't know anything at all. And like towards the end of part two, like all of those like subgroups of people that he has in his lives, they like meld together, and it's like, this is who I am. This is my entire identity. Yeah. And that's when that's like his 30th birthday.
Yeah, that's
like shortly after he publicly.
I think it was right before.
Was it right before?
I think it was right before he publicly like he released his New Yorker piece, like coming out, his second coming out. Right.
Yeah.
As an undocumented immigrant.
I thought it was really heartbreaking when so he gets into the Washington Post, and he and his team, they win a Pulitzer Prize. And this should be like it's a celebration, right? Like it's like a really high achievement. But then he goes to the bathroom and starts crying because he realizes that now he's like super visible.
Yeah.
There's like no going back.
Yeah,
it's
and he talks about how his like grandmother is like, why are you there?
Yeah. Because in order to get that job at the Post, he had to break the law, right?
Yeah.
At that point, it was perjury, right? It was just misrepresenting himself.
He just lied about his status.
That was bone chilling. Just reading that part where he was just like, "Oh, I had to mark that I was an American citizen because there was no option." And he asked the reader, like, "Which box would you choose?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a citizen? Like, how do you earn your citizenship?"
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know if I could do that. I'm too scared. I would probably work odd jobs.
A lot of people end up doing it. And I feel like before the current administration, like, I think there were a lot of people who were just marking yes, because the background checks that businesses would run were not as in depth as it is now. Like, they are not like, I work at UCLA, and like we have international students who are grad students, and they have to do like I-20s to work on campus. And that is like, that's been a process that's been in place for years. I'm sure it had a different name or a different title and whatnot. But like, I really want to think that, in my head, I think that you could have gotten a job if all you did was mark, yes, you're a citizen, because that's all they would ask you. And my point of reference for this is, it's bizarre, but in college I went to UC Irvine, and we would go to San Diego, and we would go to TJ, because that is what you do, right? You go to TJ, and when you come back from Mexico to America, to California, all I ask you is, what is your country of your citizenship? And you're supposed to say U.S. citizen, and then you would walk through. You just needed your driver's license. It was a long time ago, and my friend was not a U.S. citizen. She was a permanent resident, and she was a Philippine citizen. So when they asked her the question, she said Philippines. And they were like, well, what are you doing here? And they didn't let her cross. And I panicked, because I was like, oh shit, my friend's going to get stuck in Mexico. What do we do? But then they just went back. One of our other friends went back in the line with her. So like crossed back to Mexico. And then they told her, just put your hair up, and then we'll figure something out, like to make her look different, and went to a different line. And so when they asked the question, what country are you a citizen from? She said U.S. And then she just walked right through. There was no check, because they didn't check your passport at the time. They just believed you, like, oh, you're just another drunk college student who's coming back from TJ. It's fine. And they got through. And I'm like, that was in 2002, maybe 2001. So like, I think it was like pre 9/11. That's when a lot of this happened.
Yeah. And I feel like because he lied to pursue his dream job and was good at it, and he got such a high profile, that when he finally did come out as undocumented, he was able to do more with it, right? Because if he had just stayed low And like even if he got into advocacy, he wouldn't have had like the impact that he did, right?
Yeah.
Like it even though there were people who like doubted his intentions, right?
Yeah, like that was like really hard to read, where he's like recounting all of these events that he's speaking at, and then people who are supposed to be on the same side as him when it comes to like immigration rights, they're just like, you're just trying to take advantage, or you came too late. What are your motives? And it's just like, wow, we're really divided when we're supposed to all like kind of team up for this.
So Jose actually talked about that with us, and he said that there were a lot of people who were saying like, you're taking the money away from the undocumented like fundraising and whatnot. And he never wanted it to make it about him, which is why he created Define American, which I really am like, that's in awe of, like, oh, I'm going to create this like nonprofit to advocate for undocumented people. But it was so beneficial to continue the narrative that undocumented immigrants, undocumented citizens were simply all like a monolith of Latino people, right? Like it was easy. It was an easier sell apparently for funders, but like Jose being Jose obviously defeats that. Like he's not Latino. His name may sound it, but he's not, he's Filipino American. And, there are so many of us who are in his shoes. So it's interesting that he's had to, I feel like it's very much like a Asian American story in that like our need to be accounted for, our need to be seen, even in the margins, is always going to be a struggle.
Yeah.
So, like, towards the end of the book, he gets detained in Texas. And
That was another, I feel like he keeps like getting taken places where people don't realize maybe they shouldn't. Maybe he shouldn't.
Like that one friend who's just like, "Oh my god, I forgot that you like didn't have DACA." And I was just like, "What?" That's like the first thing I would check.
Yeah,
like,
it's obvious to like our privilege as citizens, right?
Yeah.
That like we don't have to have those considerations for our peers.
It was amusing to read how like ICE did not know what to do with him. Like he kept putting him in solitary, back in the kid tank, back in solitary.
Well, that was mainly because there were reporters visiting that camp, and that's why like they kept moving him out because
they didn't want him. They didn't want to show him.
And just like the ambivalence of the ICE agents too.
Yeah, it's just a testament to that like government bureaucracy is not going to be efficient anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like at some point, Jose says like, oh, like our immigration system is not broken. It's just always been this way. It's always been a way for us to get cheap labor.
Yes.
And, that was really shocking to me. I was like, oh, yeah. I was like, that's true.
But what really sucked about that part was just the kid that like was telling him that he was scared. And he didn't know that was what the kid was saying till like later on. Yeah. Like right now, there's still like tens of thousands of kids like separated from their parents at the border, and like it's probably terrifying for all of them.
No,
like,
our government is totally traumatized these children.
I can't like imagine what those kids are thinking about. They're probably thinking about like their parents have abandoned them. Like why did they bring us here? If they're going to like put us in jail. And, like, I think a lot of Americans, they don't understand, like, how difficult it is to get into this country. And the circumstances of, like, why would someone risk it all to get here? It's because it's so bad where they come from that they would come over here.
And, I mean, he illustrates that well with, he's talking about all the speaking engagements he goes to and all the pushback he gets from people who are like, why don't you just like he said, why don't you just come the right way? And he's like, there is no right way. I have no way.
There is no line.
Yeah, I feel that's the key part. There is no line. And that's like the point that I think like the privilege of folks who don't have to worry about citizenship, who don't understand like how ridiculous it is to become a citizen. Like it's so easy to like brush it off and be like, get in line, but there is no line. And like a person like Jose is like so high profile enough, like he just literally would need to pardon. I doubt that would happen here. And like it infuriates me, like the discussion about like the children and whatnot, and like the migrant caravan, aka the asylum seekers, because that's really what they are. Because the only reason why those people are coming to our border is because their countries are so fucked up that they need to come to another place, and their countries are so fucked up because of us, because of America. Like, let's just be bottom line real. And when Trump was like talking about like MS-13 and like El Salvadorian immigrants and how they're like all illegal and causing crime, I want to yell to the rooftops, like, the reason why El Salvador is fucked is because America fucked it up. That's the reason why everyone is here. And so it's like, look in the goddamn mirror. Like, it's like our government's fault that it's here. Like, Jose Antonio Vargas is here because his family wanted a better life. My family is here because martial law screwed everyone over, and they saw the writing on the wall that the 4-to-1 ratio from pesos to dollars was not going to hold. And to this day, it's true, because it's like 45-1 now. If my parents had stayed in the Philippines, they probably would have stayed middle class, but they still would have been poor. Like, at the end of the day, that's what it was.
Yeah.
So coming to this country was the only out for my middle class grandparents.
Yeah, and that's the promise. That's like,
Yes.
again, that's the sales pitch America makes to wherever
Absolutely.
it goes. It's like, we got it good here. You guys should come, but not really, because we don't want you here. I mean, we can end this this discussion by just trying to answer Jose's question, like, what is American? How do you define being an American? Because is it, people want to do it legally, but it's also cultural, and it's also like, for some people, it might be ethnic.
Yeah.
Like how they define what American is. But personally, I think I'm American culturally, even though legally I'm Canadian and ethnically I'm Chinese, right? If you put me in a room full of other Americans, you can tell me apart.
I would answer that question with another book. So if you're asking like who and what is an American, I would say folks should read America Ferrera's book, American Like Me, because it is an essay compilation of 31 Americans, which are people of color, and they're queer and they're trans, one of which was Gina Rosero. So she's another Filipino American who author and activist. And I think that explains what it means to be an American. Like, being an American is not a monolith. It is not being, I feel like people of color or immigrants like to say, oh, you are Korean and then you're American, and American automatically means white. Like, that is going to be, you are Taiwanese and then you're American. American means white. And it's like, our immigrant parents need to just like throw that out the window and just be like, yo, I'm American too. Like, I've been in this country for 20, 30 years. This is mine. I'm here.
For me, I'm not really sure how to define what American is, because legally my mother is American. She has an American passport, but the thing is, she doesn't vote, even though I yell at her to vote. She doesn't speak English, and she doesn't participate in anything really outside of her Korean American bubble. So it's hard for me to define like what is American when she technically is legally American, but she doesn't do anything that is quote unquote American.
And isn't that just so American, though?
I think that's an American in itself.
I know. So it's like really hard to define what is American. So I don't know. I guess to me, it's just like, are you participating in this culture? Are you creating some kind of dialogue?
Like the phrase is as American as apple pie, because we are sold that like apple pie is American, but like
apple pie isn't American.
It's not. It's Dutch. But like for me, I'm like, as much as everyone says like we are America, like I would actually say like I'm from LA. Like for me to be an Angelino, to be a Californian, like I am made up of the culture I grew up in, so I'm full of tacos and pizza and Korean barbecue and what else did I grow up with? And like Filipino point greasy food that you shouldn't eat. Like everything that gives you high blood pressure and high cholesterol. Because fuck a salad. Who wants to eat kale? That's what like white people eat.
Yeah, I mean, it's the power to define it yourself, right?
Yes.
I mean, throughout the entire book, Jose is pretty much talking about how much American he is. You know, how he was able to pull himself up from his bootstraps. He was able to find his calling and do really well in it, and use his power to like bring value to society as a whole. And the only thing that's keeping him from being a full American is just these rules that were set by people who didn't fully understand the ramifications of what they were going to do. You know, the holdover of the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, and now the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also don't like how there's this narrative of like, oh, the good immigrant and the bad immigrant.
Yeah.
Like you deserve your citizenship if you got like a 4.0 GPA and like you're doing all of these things to better society.
Yeah.
I feel like if you immigrated here, you deserve a chance to become a citizen just like anybody who is high achieving.
Especially if you're paying into the system, right?
Yeah. Like because it's so easy to say that like you are valued because you are high achieving. Like, no, the stoner who likes to like just play video games and be on the couch, it deserves like to be treated like a human being and given citizenship just as much as that high achieving person who went off to be like a doctor, lawyer, engineer. Because truth be told, that doctor, lawyer, engineer probably wishes they could be that stoner like on the couch doing nothing.
And also like just like the term immigrants, like before, like I don't know like what time period it is, but like immigrants were described as like Irish and Italian.
Yes.
Like they weren't deemed as white until like much later.
Until it was beneficial for them to be white.
Beneficial for them. So like immigrant is it's not a monolith. Like being American is not monolith. America was built on the shoulders of immigrants. So it's really hard to divide those two words, I think. American, immigrant.
Yeah.
Kind of the same thing at this point.
There's a lot of people who seem to have forgotten it, and they're mostly white, and they think that they deserve this country because God deemed it to them.
And, you know, while I enjoy dunking on white people, the fact is also, like, Jose couldn't have gotten as far as he did without the support of, like, white people who
absolutely.
Get it, who
use their privilege
to
help other people.
Whatever the reason for their intention is, like if it wasn't for them, he wouldn't have been able to get as far.
You just need to have allies. Like, Mr. Rogers says, like, in times of need, always go to the helpers, right? And like that's just like code for like everyday living. Like, don't be a dick and like
because at the end, I think most people want to see the people around them succeed. Right. Yeah. There's nothing worse than see someone not be able to reach their full potential because of like a rule or like a regulation there.
I feel like a lot of the cartoon villainy stems from like insecurity in a lot of people. And like, it's just when you step on people that way or like try to push upon values on like others, it's just because there's some like matter of insecurity in yourself that you do not understand or cannot comprehend or cannot deal with.
Yeah.
Also, people who say like undocumented citizens are dangerous because they came into the country illegally. I just want to say there are a lot of white people who are like shooting up places, and I think that is more dangerous than people crossing the border. So
and they don't cross the border like they're not just walking either. They're taking planes. So excuse me if I'm like, hey, they paid for like $1,000 plane tickets to get here. Treat them nice. Treat them with respect.
And something that Jose does with his book, and does with his movement too, and his organization, is put a face in the story on the undocumented.
Yes.
And because like when it's a faceless mob, you can dehumanize them, but when they're like a person with like goals and agency and achievements and dreams, it's a lot harder to look away.
Yeah.
Right.
I think you just have to personalize the narrative.
Yeah.
And that's what Jose's book does. It creates the story where being undocumented is not like, that Mexican dishwasher who's like working for pennies because you want to exploit them. He's a high achieving Pulitzer Prize winning journalist from the Washington Post.
Yeah. I love how so much of his story is just like him doing the exact opposite of what like
Yeah.
a rational person would probably do. Like, you want to go into Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
You want to go to the White House? You want to testify
I'm going to
in
guess
Congress?
that his Hogwarts house is Gryffindor.
Because he's brave enough to do any of those things.
Screw the consequences.
Yeah. Well, Elaine, thanks so much for joining us to discuss Dear America by Jose Antonio Vargas.
Thank you.
It's been great chatting with you.
This is a very interesting day to record this episode.
Yeah, we're recording on Election Day 2018.
We haven't checked the status in like an hour.
We were
so.
very curious about her hometown.
I am. I'm from that county, or I'm from like the county next to that county. So I really.
Which county is it?
So Gwinnett County has like a whole bunch of voting issues going on. Like their machines are down.
Is that the
They're,
one with
like,
only like 3 machines for like?
Yeah, but like,
For, like, all those
so
people
I'm
in
from Fulton County, and it's like right next to Gwinnett County, and
In
Fulton,
Georgia.
Yeah, and Fulton County is going through some shit too. So it's like, oh my god, you guys are the most progressive counties. It's like we need those votes. More than like 50% of those counties are like people of color. So yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
by the time you listen to this, we'd already figured out what went down. But there's some butterflies in the stomach here in the studio.
I just remember like the last election, like it was very depressing. Just drank like 3 bottles of wine,
Yeah.
and just cried in my car. So
I do think like we took the house.
hopefully,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Rira,
Yes,
what are we reading for the month of November?
we are reading Joe Ide's IQ, and if you like detective mystery novels, this is a pretty good book.
I'm
So-
excited. So this is also like the origin story of the series, right?
Yes.
So yeah,
Cool.
excited to go back to some crime genre fiction. Elaine,
Yes.
if people want to find out more of your thoughts, where can they go?
You can find This Philippine American Life on Facebook if you search that. We are at TFAL, at TFAL Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Just follow us there. We have really cool shirts that represent various cities like Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle, Chicago, New York. And I can't remember other ones, but I'm pretty sure there are. But yeah, buy those because like that's where Filipinos live, and the shirts are really cool.
Awesome. Check it out. Special thanks to Music Communications for letting us record. We are recording this in the Potluck Podcast Studios within the offices of Music Communications. They are a nonprofit media organization that supports AAPI filmmakers and media artists through programs such as the Armed with the Camera Fellowship and the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival. Find out more about their programs by going to bconline.org. Follow us at Books and Boba on Twitter, booksandboba.com, and also join our Goodreads group to discuss more about this book and other books that we read, as well as share some book news and announcements. Just go to goodreads.com and search Books and Boba. And finally, thank you to the Potluck Podcast Collective for having us be a part of their cooperative. The Potluck Podcast Collective is a collective of Asian American hosted podcasts featuring unique voices and stories from the Asian American community. Check out some of our other great shows, such as They Call Us Bruce, the Collabcast, Saturday School, and more. You can find out all of our programs by going to www.podcastpotluck.com. And that'll do it. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, please, if you have any more thoughts about the book and about the issues raised by the book, we'd love to hear your thoughts on our Goodreads forum. So be sure to check it out. And until next time, thanks for listening.